I was a radio operator monitoring 3I Atlas. What answered back shouldn't exist. True story. Listen, I don't have much time. They're looking for me. And when they find me, not if, but when, this story dies with me. So I need you to hear this. All of it. Every word. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't some creepypasta bullshit I made up for internet points. This happened. It's happening right now. And in about 8 months, if I'm right about the pattern, it's going to happen to all of us. My name is Staff Sergeant James Kowalski, United States Air Force. Service number... Actually, forget that. The less you know about me specifically, the safer you are. Just call me Jimmy. Everyone did, back when I had a normal life. Back when I thought monitoring radio frequencies in the middle of nowhere, Alaska, was the most boring assignment in the military. God, I was an idiot. If you're smart, you'll stop listening right now. Close this video, delete your history, and pretend you never found it. But you won't, will you? You're curious. Same as I was. Before we go any further, do me a favor. Comment where you're listening from right now. I'm serious. Your bedroom, your car during lunch break, headphones at 2 a.m. when you can't sleep. I don't care. Just tell me. Because when this video gets pulled, and it will, when my channel disappears overnight like the 3 others who tried to tell this story, at least I'll know someone, somewhere, heard the truth. At least I'll know I tried. Look, I get it. You probably think I'm paranoid, maybe mentally ill. Another conspiracy nut who thinks the government is out to get him. I wish that's all this was. Mental illness can be treated. Paranoia can be managed. But when you've heard what I've heard, when you've seen colleagues disappear for asking the wrong questions, when you get text messages with countdown timers from numbers that don't exist, that's not paranoia, that's pattern recognition. And the pattern says I have maybe 72 hours before they find this motel room in Nebraska. Yeah, Nebraska. Middle of nowhere. Paid cash, fake name, switching locations every 2 days. That's my life now. Here's your first and only warning. If you work for the government, any branch, any level, stop listening now. I'm not kidding. Not because I give a damn about clearance levels or NDAs anymore, but because knowing what I know makes you a target. It makes you dangerous to them. And trust me, you don't want to be dangerous to these people. They don't send lawyers. They don't send cops. They send cleaners. The kind that make it look like you never existed in the first place. Your family gets a folded flag and a story about a training accident. Your social media gets scrubbed. Your friends slowly forget you were ever real. I've seen it happen 3 times now. Thompson was first, then Rodriguez, then Chen, who was stupid enough to think WikiLeaks would protect him. Spoiler alert, they can't protect anyone from this. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand how this started. How a boring radio operator stationed at a classified facility in Alaska ended up running for his life, trying to warn strangers on the internet about something that sounds absolutely insane. I spent 12 years in the Air Force, 12 years of proud service, perfect record, commendations up the ass. I was good at my job, really good. That's probably why they picked me for the 3I Atlas assignment. Thought I could be trusted to sit in an underground bunker for 6 months at a time, listening to static and submarine pings, filing reports that no one would ever read. The recruiter made it sound prestigious. Special assignment, he said. Critical to national security. Only our best operators qualify. What he didn't mention was the isolation. The 6 months of Arctic darkness. The way the cold seeps into your bones even 60 feet underground. The dreams you start having when you've been listening to oceanic frequencies for 16 hours straight. Or maybe he didn't know. Maybe nobody knew what those frequencies could do to a person until it was too late. The base, and I'm not telling you exactly where it was, for your safety and mine, was disguised as a weather research station. Officially, we were monitoring climate data, studying ice formations, boring science stuff that no one would ever question or care about investigating. Unofficially, we were running 3I Atlas. If you've never heard of it, good. You weren't supposed to. Even most military personnel don't know it exists. It's a signals intelligence program supposedly designed to track submarine movements using ultra-low frequency monitoring. The public thinks we track subs with satellites and destroyer-mounted sonar. That's partly true, but satellites can't see 3 miles underwater, and destroyer sonar has range limitations. 3I Atlas is different. It uses the Earth itself as a conductor, sending ULF waves through the ocean floor, bouncing signals off the planet's core. We could hear a Russian sub's reactor humming from 8,000 miles away. We could track Chinese ballistic missile submarines playing hide-and-seek under the Arctic ice shelf. At least that's what we were told we were doing. That's what I believed for the first 4 months. Before I started noticing the anomalies, before the real signals started coming through, before Thompson showed me what he'd found hidden in the system's code, buried so deep you'd never find it unless you were really, really looking. Before that night in December when something answered back. I need you to understand something. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Never was. I thought 9/11 truthers were idiots, laughed at flat earthers, made fun of people who believed in chemtrails. I was a skeptic, a realist, a by-the-book military man who trusted the chain of command and believed in the mission. So when I tell you that our government has been in contact with something that shouldn't exist, something that lives deeper in our oceans than anything should be able to survive, something that's been trying to warn us about our own future, I need you to know this isn't coming from some gullible fool. This is coming from someone who fought against believing it every step of the way. Someone who tried to find rational explanations even as the evidence piled up. Someone who only accepted the truth when it literally spoke my daughter's name through a classified military radio system from 16,000 meters below sea level. Her full name, her birthday, her favorite song, details that were never in my personnel file, details that no foreign intelligence service could know, details that only something reading our thoughts or our future could possibly access. My daughter Sarah is 8 years old now, lives with her mom in Portland. I haven't seen her in 3 months, haven't talked to her in 6 weeks. It's killing me, but it's the only way to keep her safe. As long as they think I'm running solo, as long as they believe she's not involved, she might have a chance. I already told her mom to move, made up some story about a stalker. They're leaving Portland next week, going to stay with relatives in Canada, away from the coast, away from the cities on the list. Yeah, there's a list. 7 cities, 7 dates, all between March and December 2025. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. You need to hear this in order, or you'll think I'm insane. Maybe you already do. Maybe that's their best defense, making the truth sound so crazy that no one would ever believe it. But look at the comments on this video when you're done. Look how many get deleted within hours. Look at the view count resetting. Look at how your YouTube recommendations suddenly change after watching this, pushing you toward different content, making you forget you ever saw this. I'm uploading this from a truck stop Wi-Fi at 3 a.m., middle of nowhere, Nebraska, using a laptop I bought with cash from a pawn shop. After this uploads, I'm destroying the laptop and moving again. I've got maybe 6 more stops before they triangulate the pattern and figure out where I'm heading. My end game. The place where I've hidden the physical evidence, the original recordings, everything Thompson gathered before he disappeared. If something happens to me, if this video suddenly vanishes, if my channel goes dark, someone else needs to know where to look. So I'm encoding the location in these videos, spread across all 12 parts. Piece it together, and you'll find everything. The recordings of the voice, the decoded coordinates, the photos of the documents Thompson found, the proof that 3I Atlas was never about submarines. But first, you need to understand what happened that night in November. The night I was alone in the monitoring station, drinking my 4th cup of terrible coffee, thinking about Sarah's Christmas presents, when I heard the first impossible signal. A response from a depth that doesn't exist, in a language that wasn't quite human, carrying a message that would destroy everything I thought I knew about our world and our future. If you're still listening, if you haven't clicked away to watch something safe and normal, then you're already in this with me. They know who watches these videos. They track engagement, comments, shares. Your IP is probably already logged somewhere in a database, flagged for potential security concern. But don't panic. As long as you don't try to verify what I'm telling you, as long as you don't go digging for more information, you'll probably be fine. Probably. They can't disappear everyone who watches a YouTube video. Too messy, too noticeable. But if you start searching for 3I Atlas on government websites, if you try to contact current personnel at Arctic installations, if you start asking questions about ultra-low frequency oceanic monitoring, well, don't say I didn't warn you. This is your last chance to leave. To pretend this is just another creepypasta, another ARG, another piece of internet fiction, to go back to your normal life where the scariest thing you have to worry about is your mortgage payment or your relationship problems. Still here? Then let me tell you what I heard that night. Let me tell you about the sound that changed everything. Let me paint you a picture of hell. Not the fire and brimstone kind, the other kind, the frozen kind. The kind where you spend 6 months in total darkness, 60 feet underground, in a concrete bunker that smells like recycled air and broken dreams. Welcome to Installation Echo 77, or as we called it, the Tomb. 200 miles north of Anchorage, 50 miles from the nearest civilian anything, buried under permafrost that never thaws. Officially, it was the Arctic Climate Research Station. If you looked it up on Google Earth, and don't, by the way, you'd see a couple of prefab buildings, some weather equipment, maybe a satellite dish or two. Boring science stuff. What you wouldn't see was the elevator shaft that went down 60 feet, the 3 underground levels, the reinforced concrete walls thick enough to survive a nuclear blast. You wouldn't see the server rooms, the monitoring stations, the military-grade communication arrays. You definitely wouldn't see the 12 of us who lived down there like moles, slowly going crazy from vitamin D deficiency and the constant hum of electronics. I arrived in September 2019, right as the last sunset of the year was happening. That's not poetry, that's literal. The sun dipped below the horizon on September 23rd and didn't come back up until March. 6 months of darkness. They prepare you for it in training, give you special lamps, vitamin supplements, scheduled exercise routines. What they don't prepare you for is how the darkness gets inside you, how your dreams turn weird, how you start seeing things in the shadows between the LED panels, how you begin to understand why the suicide rate at Arctic installations is classified information. But I'm getting off track. The point is, I was there for a specific job, monitoring Station 3 on the midnight to 8 shift, the dead shift. The shift nobody wanted because nothing ever happened except Russian subs playing their same old games and the occasional whale song fucking with our frequencies. Thompson had the station next to mine. Rodriguez was across the room. Chen handled the technical maintenance. Good guys, all of them. Professional, competent, gone now, every last one. The work itself was mind-numbing. Picture sitting in a gray concrete room lit by fluorescent lights that buzzed just at the edge of hearing. 3 walls covered in monitors showing waterfall displays, frequency analyzers, signal strength indicators. The 4th wall had a world map with real-time tracking of every submarine we could detect. Little red dots for Russians, yellow for Chinese, blue for ours, green for allied nations. My job was to sit there for 8 hours, wearing headphones that cost more than my car, listening to the ocean. Not the ocean like you hear at the beach, the deep ocean. The electromagnetic signatures of submarines' reactors, the click patterns of encrypted communications, the way metal groans under pressure at different depths. I had to log everything. Every anomaly, every pattern change, every signal that didn't match our database. After 4 months, I could tell you the acoustic signature of every submarine class in the Russian Pacific Fleet. I knew which Chinese captain liked to run his engines a little hot, which American boomers were overdue for maintenance by the sound of their cooling pumps. Thompson used to joke that we were the world's most expensive whale watchers. He wasn't entirely wrong. Whales were a constant problem. Blue whales especially. Their calls are in the same ultra-low frequency range we monitored, and they could travel thousands of miles through the ocean. More than once I logged what I thought was a submarine only to realize it was a horny whale looking for a mate. Thompson had been there 2 years before I arrived. Knew all the tricks. You can tell the difference, he'd say, because subs try to be quiet. Whales don't give a fuck. He had this laugh, this booming laugh that echoed off the concrete walls. Kept us all sane, honestly. Thompson was the one who started the coffee club, the poker nights, the unauthorized movie server on the internal network. He was also the first one to notice that something was wrong with 3i Atlas. The first one to start asking questions. The first one to disappear. But on that night in November, he was still there, still cracking jokes, still keeping us human in that inhuman place. The 3i Atlas system itself was a marvel of engineering, even if I didn't understand half of how it worked. The basic principle was simple. We sent ultra-low frequency waves through the Earth's crust and ocean floor, using the planet itself as a transmission medium. These waves could penetrate water and rock in ways regular radio couldn't. They'd bounce off submarines, off underwater mountains, off anything with a different density than seawater, and return to our sensors. The classified part was the power source and the processing capability. We were running signals through quantum processors that could detect phase shifts of less than a nanosecond. We could hear a submarine screw turning from the other side of the planet. We could track acoustic signatures through the Earth's core. The amount of data we collected every second would fill a library. The AI systems, and yes, we were using AI years before ChatGPT, would filter through it all, looking for patterns, anomalies, threats. Most of the time, it found nothing. Most of the time, we were just very expensive peacekeepers, making sure nobody was sneaking nuclear missiles around under the ice. November 17th started like every other shift. I came in at 23:45 hours, 15 minutes early like always. Rodriguez was finishing his shift, looked tired. "Anything interesting?" I asked. "Just the usual," he said. "A Kula class playing hide and seek near the Bering Strait, some cargo traffic off Japan. Oh, and there's been some whale activity in Grid 77 Alpha, but it's weird. That should have been my first warning." Rodriguez didn't say things were weird lightly. He'd been doing this for 5 years, seen everything. But I was tired, had been up too late video calling Sarah, trying to help with her homework from 3,000 miles away. I just nodded, took my seat, put on the headphones. Rodriguez logged out, headed for bed. For the first 3 hours, everything was normal, boring even. I was tracking a Chinese-type Shou-94 submarine that was trying to be sneaky near the Philippines, logging its acoustic signature, noting its depth changes. Coffee number 1 at 0100 hours, coffee number 2 at 0200. By 0300, I was fighting to stay awake, playing solitaire on my phone between logs. Then I heard it. At first, I thought it was equipment malfunction. The signal was coming from Grid 77 Alpha, same area Rodriguez had mentioned, but the depth reading was wrong, had to be wrong. My screen showed the signal origin at 15,147 meters below sea level. For context, the Mariana Trench, the deepest known part of the ocean, bottoms out at about 11,000 meters. The deepest submarine ever built can't go below 1,000 meters without being crushed like a beer can. Whatever was making this signal was allegedly sitting 4 miles deeper than the ocean floor. Impossible. I ran a diagnostic. Everything came back green. I checked the other stations. Thompson was focused on something near Greenland. Chen was doing routine maintenance. Nobody else seemed to notice. I should have logged it as an equipment error and moved on. That's what the protocol said. That's what a smart person would have done. But I was curious. Blame it on the boredom, the isolation, the need to solve a puzzle. I adjusted the filters, isolated the frequency, and listened closer. What I heard changed everything. It wasn't random noise. It wasn't geological activity. It wasn't any whale song in our database. It was structured, organized, deliberate. Imagine if you took a whale song, slowed it down by half, and fed it through a synthesizer designed by someone who had never heard Earth music. There was a pattern to it, rhythmic pulses that seemed almost mathematical. I started recording on my personal phone, a complete violation of protocol. Every device was supposed to be locked in a Faraday cage outside the monitoring room. But after 4 months, security had gotten lax. We all bent the rules a little. Thompson had a tablet full of movies. Rodriguez kept a backup hard drive of family photos. Chen had somehow smuggled in a Nintendo Switch. My phone was my lifeline to Sarah, full of her pictures, videos of her school plays, voice messages saying, "I love you, Daddy." I told myself I was just recording it to show Thompson later, to get his opinion. But even then, I think I knew. Some part of me, some primitive instinct honed by millions of years of evolution, knew that I was hearing something that shouldn't exist. The signal lasted exactly 17 minutes and 33 seconds. Then, it just stopped, cut off mid-pulse like someone had pulled the plug. I sat there for another hour, headphones pressed tight against my ears, listening to nothing but the normal ocean sounds. A Russian sub 500 miles away, shipping traffic near Japan, the ever-present whale songs that actually sounded like whale songs. Nothing from that impossible depth. I could have deleted the recording, should have deleted it, should have logged it as an anomaly and moved on with my shift, but I didn't. I kept that recording, transferred it to my laptop during break, started analyzing it with audio software I wasn't supposed to have. The more I analyzed it, the more convinced I became that this wasn't random. The pulses followed a specific pattern. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23, prime numbers. Then the pattern would shift. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. The Fibonacci sequence. Then something else. Something that didn't match any mathematical sequence I knew. It was like something down there was trying different combinations. trying different languages, looking for one we would understand. When Thompson came in for his shift at 0800, I pulled him aside. "I need to show you something," I said. He could see it in my face, I think. The excitement mixed with fear, the look of someone who's found something they weren't supposed to find. We went to the break room, which wasn't monitored, officially. I played him the recording on my laptop, volume down low, both of us leaning in close. I'll never forget the way his face changed as he listened. The joke died in his eyes. The perpetual smirk faded. When it finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said 5 words that still haunt me. "I've heard this before, Jimmy." He looked around, checking if anyone was nearby, then leaned closer. 3 weeks ago, different frequency, different grid, but the same pattern. I reported it to Hayes, Colonel Hayes, our commanding officer. He told me to delete everything and forget about it. Said it was a known phenomenon, some kind of geological thing. But Jimmy, he pulled out his own phone, scrolled to a video. I've been recording them too. Thompson's recordings were worse than mine. Not worse quality, worse implications. He had 17 different incidents logged over 3 weeks, all from different coordinates, all from impossible depths. The shortest was 3 minutes. The longest went on for nearly an hour. As we sat in that break room, surrounded by the hum of vending machines and the smell of burnt coffee, he showed me his notebook. Yeah, a physical notebook. Thompson was old school like that. Page after page of timestamps, coordinates, frequencies, and patterns. He'd been tracking them like a scientist, looking for correlations. "Look at this," he said, flipping to a page covered in red ink. "Every signal happens exactly 73 hours apart. Not roughly 73, exactly 73 hours down to the second. And they're moving." He showed me a map he'd drawn, dots connected by lines. The signals were following a path along the ocean floor, moving northwest at about 50 kilometers per cycle. "At first I thought it was tectonic," he said. "Maybe some kind of underground river or magma flow. But Jimmy, he pulled up something on his phone, a spectrogram of one of his recordings. Listen to this part. Tell me that's geological." The sound that came from his phone made my skin crawl. It wasn't just the mathematical patterns I'd heard. This one had layers, harmonics. It sounded almost organic, like something breathing, if breathing could happen at frequencies that made your bones ache. But underneath that, buried in the static, was something else. Thompson had to slow it down 800% for me to hear it clearly. It was Morse code, actual, honest-to-God Morse code, tapped out in those impossible deep frequencies. The message was simple, repeated over and over. "Can you hear us?" No question mark, just those 4 words, again and again, getting clearer with each repetition, like something was learning how to communicate. My hands were shaking when I set the phone down. "This is a joke, right?" I asked. "Someone's fucking with the equipment. Maybe the Russians have some new tech," but Thompson was already shaking his head. I thought the same thing. Spent 2 weeks trying to prove it was interference, hacking, anything. "But Jimmy, the signal degradation matches exactly what you'd expect from that depth. The pressure distortion, the thermal layers, the salinity gradients, it's all perfect. Whatever's sending this, it really is 15,000 meters down. We agreed to keep monitoring, to keep recording, to gather more evidence before going over Hayes' head. That was our first mistake. We thought we had time. We thought we were dealing with some kind of weird discovery, maybe geothermal vents creating acoustic phenomena. Maybe some classified experiment we weren't cleared to know about. We didn't think, look, how could we have known? How could anyone predict that the signals would start responding to our specific broadcasts, that they would learn our names, that they would know things about us that were impossible to know? We were scientists, technically. Military scientists, sure. But we approached this like a problem to solve, not a threat to run from. Thompson took the day shift recordings. I handled nights. We set up a hidden partition on one of the backup servers, encrypted to hell and back, where we stored everything. Chen helped with that part. We told him we were archiving whale songs for a personal project. He didn't ask questions. Chen never asked questions, which is probably why he lasted longer than Thompson. 3 nights after that first signal, it happened again. Same depth, but 50 kilometers northwest, exactly where Thompson's pattern predicted it would be. This time I was ready. I had better recording equipment, borrowed from the seismic monitoring station under the pretense of doing maintenance. I isolated the frequency, cleaned up the interference, and captured everything in high definition. The pattern started the same: prime numbers, Fibonacci, then that unknown sequence. But after about 10 minutes, it changed. It started mimicking the 3i Atlas ping sequence. Our active sonar, the one we use to map the ocean floor, sends out a very specific pattern of pulses. It's classified, encrypted, supposedly impossible to decode without our quantum keys. But this thing, whatever it was, played it back to us note perfect. Then it started modifying it, adding harmonics, creating variations. It was like listening to someone learning to play a piano in real time, going from choppy single notes to complex melodies in minutes. And then, at exactly the 15-minute mark, it did something that made me rip my headphones off and step back from the console. It spoke, not in Morse code, not in mathematical patterns, but in actual words. Distorted, pitched down to subsonic frequencies, swimming through so much interference, I had to run it through every filter we had to understand it. But it was definitely speech. English. With an accent I couldn't place, like someone had learned the language from a corrupted audio file. The words were simple. Hello surface, we receive you, hello surface. Over and over, getting clearer with each repetition. I sat there, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it over the ventilation system, staring at the screen that still showed the signal coming from 15,147 meters below sea level. This was it. This was first contact. Not from space, but from our own planet. From some place that shouldn't exist, couldn't exist, but apparently did. I reached for the emergency protocol button, the one that would alert Hayes and the entire command structure that we had in Priority 1 unknown contact. My finger hovered over it for maybe 5 seconds. Then I pulled my hand back, because I remembered what Thompson had said. Hayes already knew. He'd been told about the signals weeks ago, and his response was to bury it. Instead of following protocol, I did something that probably signed my death warrant. I responded. There's a reason we use passive monitoring most of the time. Active sonar, actually sending signals into the ocean, can reveal our position to enemies. But at 0347 hours on November 21st, 2019, with no one else in the monitoring station, I switched 3i Atlas from passive to active mode. I configured a simple pulse pattern. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS, in Morse code. The most basic message humanity knows. Then I sent it, aimed directly at the coordinates of the signal. The power draw was enormous. Every screen in the station flickered. Somewhere, an alarm went off, and then mysteriously stopped. The pulse went out, traveling down through miles of water and rock to whatever was waiting in the deep. For 30 seconds, nothing, just the usual ocean noise. Then, clear as day, the pattern came back. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. But followed immediately by something else. My full name, spelled out in NATO phonetic alphabet. James Andrew Kowalski, Staff Sergeant, United States Air Force, father of Sarah Marie Kowalski. We know you. We need you to listen. I've been in combat. I've been shot at. I've had surface-to-air missiles lock onto my aircraft. But nothing has ever terrified me like hearing my daughter's name spoken by something at the bottom of the ocean. I yanked the system back to passive mode, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type. How did it know? How could it possibly know? Our personnel files are classified, but even those don't list family members' middle names. Sarah's middle name isn't on any government document related to me. It's only on her birth certificate, and that's in a filing cabinet in Portland, Oregon. The signal continued for another 10 minutes, listing facts about everyone on the base. Thompson's medical history, Hayes's classified service record from Desert Storm, Rodriguez's mother's maiden name, Chen's gambling debts that he thought nobody knew about, intimate, impossible details spoken in that distorted alien voice from 15,000 meters below. Then it said something that made me run to the bathroom and throw up. Your daughter dreams of becoming a marine biologist. She will not live to see the oceans die, unless you listen, unless you act. I burned the entire recording onto 3 separate drives. One I hid in my quarters, sealed inside a waterproof case and tucked behind a loose ventilation panel. One I gave to Thompson, who put it in his safe. The third I mailed to my ex-wife with instructions not to open it unless something happened to me. That package is probably what saved her life. Convinced her I wasn't crazy when I called 2 months later begging her to leave the coast. But that night, sitting alone in that monitoring station, I didn't know what to do. Report it, and probably disappear like whoever had found this before us. Keep quiet, and pretend I hadn't just made contact with something impossible. I chose option 3, dig deeper. I pulled up every archive we had, going back 5 years to when 3i Atlas came online, started running pattern recognition, looking for similar signals that might have been dismissed as noise or equipment malfunction. What I found made me realize this had been going on much, much longer than anyone suspected. Buried in the logs, labeled as geological anomalies or equipment calibration errors, were hundreds of similar incidents. Brief contacts, always from impossible depths, always in that same mathematical pattern. But the early ones were different, cruder, more like animals learning to mimic sounds than actual communication. As the years progressed, they got more sophisticated, more human. By 2018, they were using basic English words. By early 2019, complete sentences. We hadn't made first contact that night. We just finally noticed that something had been trying to contact us for years. And according to the timestamps, the signals were getting stronger, more frequent, more desperate. Something down there wanted our attention, needed it. And based on what it said about Sarah, about the oceans dying, we were running out of time to listen. I worked through the rest of my shift in a daze, mechanically logging regular submarine traffic while my mind raced. When Thompson relieved me at 0800, I pulled him aside and showed him everything. The recording, the archives, the pattern emerging from years of data. He listened to the whole thing, his face growing paler with each word. "We have to go to Hayes with this," he said finally. "This is beyond classified. This is paradigm shifting. This is already known," I interrupted. "Look at these logs. Someone's been marking these incidents and burying them for years. Hayes knows. Someone above Hayes knows. And they want it kept quiet." Thompson was quiet for a long moment, then said the words that would ultimately get him killed. "Then we go around them. We contact NOAA, the Navy. Hell, we leak it to the press if we have to. Jimmy, if something's trying to warn us about an extinction event, we can't just—" The door to the break room opened. Colonel Hayes walked in, stone-faced, flanked by 2 men I'd never seen before. Men in suits, not uniforms. Men with the kind of empty eyes that had seen too much and cared too little. "Gentlemen," Hayes said, his voice flat, "we need to talk about your extracurricular activities." That was the beginning of the end. The moment the cover-up became personal. The moment Thompson and I went from being assets to liabilities. But we didn't know that yet. We still thought we could explain, could convince them. We still thought the truth mattered more than the secret. Hayes didn't say a word for the first 5 minutes. He just sat there, hands folded on the metal table in interrogation room 2. Because yes, our weather station had an interrogation room. The 2 suits stood behind him like statues, not even blinking. Thompson and I sat on the other side, still in our uniforms, still thinking this was some kind of misunderstanding we could clear up. Finally, Hayes pulled out a tablet, swiped through some files, and turned it toward us. On the screen was every single recording we'd made, every file we'd hidden, every encrypted note we thought was secure. "Gentlemen," he said, voice like grinding stone, "you've stumbled into something that's been classified beyond your pay grade since before you were born. The good news is you're not in trouble, yet. The bad news is you're about to sign some papers that will legally allow us to disappear you if you ever speak about this again." One of the suits stepped forward, placed a stack of documents in front of us. NDAs that made our standard classification agreements look like kindergarten permission slips. Papers that essentially said we were now property of a program we weren't even allowed to know the name of. "Sir," Thompson started, always the brave one, "with all due respect, if there's something down there trying to communicate with us, shouldn't we—" "Stop," Hayes cut him off. "Right there. That's where you stop. There is nothing down there. What you've detected is a classified military experiment in deep ocean acoustic manipulation. The patterns you think you found are intentional, designed to test our monitoring capabilities and train our operators to distinguish between natural and artificial phenomena." It was such obvious bullshit that even the suits looked uncomfortable. But Hayes continued, reading from what was clearly a prepared script. "You will delete all unauthorized recordings. You will cease all independent investigation. You will return to your normal duties and never speak of this again. Not to each other, not to your families, not even in your sleep. Am I clear?" Thompson looked at me. I looked at Thompson. We both knew this was the moment. Sign the papers, keep our heads down, pretend we never heard what we heard, or refuse and, well, people who refuse don't get to tell their stories on YouTube later. I signed. Thompson signed. We handed back the papers and Hayes visibly relaxed. "Good. Smart choice, gentlemen. Now, one more thing. He nodded to one of the suits, who pulled out a small device that looked like a smartphone with too many antennas. Neural resonance scanner, the suit explained in a voice like dead leaves. Checks for any unauthorized neural pattern modifications. Standard procedure when dealing with ULF exposure. That should have been our second warning. Why would ultra-low frequency sounds modify neural patterns? Why would they have a device specifically designed to check for it? But we sat there like good soldiers while they scanned us, the device beeping softly as it passed over our heads. Green light for me, green light for Thompson. The suit nodded, satisfied. Clean. No contamination. Contamination. That's what they called it. Like the signals were some kind of infection. Maybe they were right. Maybe that's exactly what they were. They let us go back to our quarters, but I could feel the surveillance immediately. Every camera that used to randomly sweep now stayed focused a little too long on me. Every time I accessed a computer, there was a half-second delay like someone was monitoring my keystrokes. My personal phone, which had always had perfect signal thanks to our military satellites, suddenly developed mysterious dead zones whenever I tried to call home. But the worst part was the dreams. That night, for the first time, I dreamed of the ocean. Not the surface ocean with its waves and whales, but the deep ocean, the black ocean, the pressure ocean, where sperm whales dive to fight giant squids in eternal darkness. In the dream, I was sinking, always sinking, past the point where sunlight dies, past the thermal layers, past the volcanic vents with their alien ecosystems, down to where the pressure should have crushed me into paste. But somehow I kept breathing, and at the bottom, in trenches that don't exist on any map, there were cities, geometries that hurt to perceive, architecture that followed rules that weren't quite physics, and from those cities, voices calling up, calling my name, calling Sarah's name, showing me images of events that hadn't happened yet. Cities drowning, oceans boiling, the sky burning with colors that don't exist. I woke up at 0300, gasping, soaked in sweat despite the Arctic cold. My phone was buzzing with a text from an unknown number. You are starting to see, do not stop listening. 247 days remain. I deleted the message immediately, but I knew it was already logged somewhere, adding another mark to whatever file they were building on me. I couldn't go back to sleep, so I did what I always did when insomnia hit. I analyzed data, but not the official data. I had memorized enough of the patterns to reconstruct them on paper, old school, where no computer could track me. The mathematical sequences, the progression of communication complexity, the 73-hour intervals, the northwestern movement pattern. There had to be a reason for all of it. These things, whatever they were, weren't random. They were following a plan. As I worked, something clicked. The movement pattern wasn't random. It was following something. I grabbed an old atlas from the break room, started plotting the coordinates. When I connected the dots, my blood went cold. The signals were following the exact path of the Cascadia subduction zone, the Pacific Northwest's ticking time bomb, where the Juan de Fuca plate slides under the North American plate. The fault that scientists say is 300 years overdue for a magnitude 9+ earthquake. The big one that would devastate everything from Northern California to British Columbia. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was when I overlaid the signal locations with geological surveys of the area. Every single signal originated from points where the ocean floor was wrong, where sonar readings showed solid rock, but seismic data suggested hollow spaces, caverns that shouldn't exist at that depth, that couldn't exist according to our understanding of physics, but according to the data, they were there. Miles-wide voids under impossible pressure, following the fault line like a submarine highway. I was so absorbed in the patterns that I didn't hear Thompson come in until he was right behind me. "Can't sleep either?" he asked, looking at my maps. I showed him what I'd found, watched his face go through the same progression mine had. Confusion, realization, fear. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "It's not random. They're following the fault. He stopped, looked at the door, then leaned closer. "Jimmy, I need to show you something, but not here. Meet me at Storage Unit 7 in 20 minutes. Come alone, and for God's sake, make sure you're not followed." Storage Unit 7 was where we kept obsolete equipment, stuff too old to use but too expensive to throw away. It was also one of the few places on base without cameras, an oversight that we'd all taken advantage of at various times for various reasons. Thompson was already there when I arrived, along with Chen, who looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Tell him what you told me," Thompson said to Chen. Chen pulled out a laptop, one I'd never seen before. running some kind of custom Linux distribution. "I'm not supposed to have this," he said, fingers flying over the keyboard. "But I've been curious about 3i Atlas since I got here. The processing power, the quantum encryption, it's all overkill for submarine tracking. So I've been exploring." He pulled up lines of code that meant nothing to me, but Thompson was nodding along. "The system has hidden subroutines," Chen continued. "Protocols that activate under specific conditions, and one of them triggered 3 weeks ago." He showed us a log file, timestamps matching our signal detections. When those ULF patterns started, 3i Atlas began running a program called Leviathan Protocol. It's not monitoring those signals, it's responding to them. Having a conversation we can't see because it's happening in frequency ranges our equipment isn't supposed to monitor. "That's impossible," I said. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't. The military had been working on AI for decades longer than the public knew. If they had created something advanced enough, "Not impossible," Chen said. "Watch this." He pulled up another window, showing what looked like a chat log. But instead of human languages, it was in mathematics. Pure mathematics. The kind that would take teams of PhDs to decode. "This is from 3 nights ago," Chen said. "The night you responded to the signal, Jimmy." He scrolled down and there it was, my SOS, followed by streams of mathematical responses. Then, at the bottom, something that made us all step back. The math had been translated, probably by whatever AI was running Leviathan. The message was simple, but horrifying. "Preparation phase complete. Contact established with surface asset. Beginning revelation protocol. Estimated time to surface breach, 247 days. Probability of surface survival without intervention, 0.1%. Thompson grabbed the laptop, read it again, then looked at us. "Surface breach. They're coming up. Whatever's down there, it's planning to surface in 247 days. That's August 15th, 2020, Chen added quietly. "And according to this, once they surface, humanity has a 0.001% chance of survival. Unless," he pulled up another file, "unless we help them." That's what the signals are about. They're not threats, they're warnings. They're trying to prepare us for something that happens with or without them, but we only survive if we listen. We stood there in that cold storage room, 3 men realizing we had stumbled onto either the most elaborate hoax in military history or the most important discovery in human history. And we had no way of knowing which. No way except to keep listening, keep recording, keep trying to understand what wanted so desperately to be heard from beneath miles of water and rock. Thompson was the first to speak. "We need more evidence. Chen, can you keep monitoring Leviathan without getting caught?" Chen nodded. "And Jimmy, we need those recordings. All of them, even the ones you think you deleted. Because of course nothing was ever really deleted on a military system. We give this 2 weeks, gather everything we can, then we go public all at once, too much for them to cover up." It was a good plan, a brave plan, the kind of plan that would have worked in a movie. But this wasn't a movie, and we had severely underestimated how closely we were being watched. As we left Storage Unit 7, separately, carefully, each thinking we were being clever, satellites were already tracking our heat signatures. Microphones we didn't know existed had recorded every word, and somewhere, in an office that didn't officially exist, someone was making a decision about what to do with us. Thompson would be the first to disappear, exactly 1 week later. But before that happened, before everything went to hell, we managed to record something that changed everything. Something that proved beyond any doubt that the signals weren't coming from submarines, weren't from secret experiments, weren't from anything human. They were coming from something that had been waiting at the bottom of our oceans for longer than human civilization had existed. Waiting and watching, learning our languages, our technology, our weaknesses. Preparing for the day when the conditions would be right to reclaim what they considered theirs. The entire planet they'd been forced to abandon 11,000 years ago. The next week was a masterclass in paranoid productivity. Thompson, Chen, and I worked our regular shifts like nothing had happened. Perfect little soldiers following orders. But every spare moment was dedicated to gathering evidence. Chen had written a ghost program that siphoned copies of Leviathan's communications to an encrypted drive. Thompson was mapping every historical anomaly in the 3i Atlas database, finding patterns going back decades. And me, I was the bait. Because after my direct contact with whatever was down there, the signals had become focused on me. Every night, precisely at 0317 hours, My monitoring station would receive a directed transmission, not broadcast wide like the others, targeted specifically at my console, using frequencies that should have been impossible to generate from that depth. The messages were getting clearer, more complex, more disturbing. They knew things, not just about me, but about events that hadn't happened yet. Stock market crashes down to the exact percentage point. Natural disasters with precise timestamps. Political assassinations that wouldn't occur for months. At first, I thought they were threats, but Thompson had a different theory. They're trying to establish credibility, proving they can see things we can't. On November 28th, Thanksgiving night, while everyone else was in the mess hall pretending turkey served in an Arctic bunker tasted like home, I received the most detailed message yet. It lasted 47 minutes, and what it contained made everything else look like small talk. The entity, I'd started thinking of it as singular, though I suspected it was more of a collective, didn't just communicate in words anymore. It sent images, encoded in acoustic patterns that my brain somehow translated into visuals. Don't ask me how that's possible. Chen theorized it had something to do with the neural resonance they'd scanned us for, that prolonged exposure to these specific frequencies was rewiring our brains to decode them. All I know is that I sat there, headphones clamped to my skull, watching impossible visions play out behind my closed eyelids. I saw the Earth 11,000 years ago, during what we call the Younger Dryas period. The ice age that shouldn't have happened, that came out of nowhere and froze half the planet. Only in these visions, it wasn't natural. It was deliberate, a desperate attempt to freeze out something that had taken root in the oceans, something that had come from outside and made the deep places its home. The images showed cities beneath the ice, entire civilizations that predated ours by millennia. But they weren't human cities. The architecture followed non-Euclidean geometry that made my eyes water just trying to process it. The inhabitants were wrong. Humanoid in the way a child's drawing is humanoid. All the right parts, but proportions that shouldn't exist. Too many joints in their limbs. Eyes that weren't quite where eyes should be. And they were fleeing, always fleeing, deeper and deeper into the ocean as the ice spread above them. Then the vision shifted. I saw our present, but from below. Our submarines looked like insects skittering across the ceiling of their world. Our deep-sea drilling operations were puncture wounds in their sky. Our sonar pings were screams that had been driving them mad for decades. But it was the future visions that made me rip off the headphones and run to the bathroom to dry heave. Cities drowning not from rising seas, but from things emerging from them. Humanity not conquered, but transformed, twisted into shapes that served purposes we couldn't understand. And at the center of it all, Sarah, my Sarah, standing on a beach that used to be Portland, watching the sky turn colors that don't exist in our spectrum. Her 8-year-old body beginning to change into something that wasn't quite human anymore. When I staggered back to my station, there was a text message on my personal phone. These are probabilities, not certainties. Timeline alpha, extinction, timeline beta, transformation, timeline gamma, cooperation. You are the variable. Choose. I should have reported it immediately. Should have run to Hayes, confessed everything, thrown myself on whatever mercy the military had for soldiers who'd gone too deep. But I didn't, because mixed in with those visions of horror were visions of wonder, technologies that could solve every problem humanity faced, energy sources that made nuclear fusion look like burning coal, medical knowledge that could end death itself. They were offering us a trade, our evolution for our survival, our humanity for our continued existence, and they were running out of time to make the offer nicely. I documented everything, encrypted it, and sent copies to 3 different email addresses I'd memorized but never used before. Insurance policies in case I disappeared. Then I went to find Thompson and Chen. We needed to decide. Were we going to be humanity's warning system or its welcoming committee? Thompson was in his quarters, door locked, lights off. That should have been my first warning. Thompson never locked his door. He was the kind of guy who wanted people to drop by. I knocked, heard movement inside, then silence. Thompson, it's Jimmy. Open up, man. I've got something you need to see. More silence. Then quietly, almost too soft to hear. They're listening, Jimmy. They're always listening. Don't trust the walls. I leaned closer to the door. Thompson, what's going on? Are you okay? A laugh, but not Thompson's usual boom. This was thin, cracked, wrong. They showed me things, Jimmy. Things about my family. My sister's cancer diagnosis next year. My nephew's car accident in March. The earthquake that's going to hit Seattle in April. They know everything that's going to happen, and they're willing to trade that information. But the price, God, Jimmy, the price is so much higher than you think. The door opened a crack, and I saw Thompson's face. He'd aged 10 years in 10 days. His eyes were bloodshot, darting constantly like he was tracking invisible flies. They're not from outside, Jimmy. They're from here. They were always here. We're the invaders. We're the infection they're trying to cure. Before I could respond, alarms started blaring. Not the fire alarm or the security alert, the contamination alarm, the one that meant someone had detected a biological or chemical hazard. Emergency lights bathed everything in red, and Hayes' voice boomed over the intercom. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Lockdown protocol in effect immediately. Thompson grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. It's starting, he whispered. Chen found something in the code. Leviathan isn't just talking to them. It's been preparing our systems for them. Every 3i Atlas installation worldwide is about to... The lights went out. Not just the emergency lights. Everything. The hum of electronics that had been our constant companion for months vanished, leaving a silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Then, from deep below, transmitted through the rock and ice itself, came a sound that bypassed our ears and went straight into our bones. It was singing, harmonic frequencies that turned the entire base into a resonance chamber. And in that singing, compressed into acoustic patterns our modified brains could now decode, was a message. Protocol acknowledged. Surface assets identified. Beginning Phase 2. Revelation. The backup generators kicked in, bathing everything in a sick green glow. But the screens in the monitoring station weren't showing our normal displays. They were showing locations around the world. New York, London, Tokyo, Los Angeles, Moscow, Beijing, Sydney. And in each city, at exactly the same moment, every piece of electronic equipment that operated on ultra-low frequencies, submarine communication arrays, geological sensors, even some medical equipment, began broadcasting the same signal we'd been monitoring for weeks. The secret was out, whether the government wanted it or not, but it wasn't happening the way we'd planned. This wasn't a controlled disclosure. This was forced revelation. Whatever was down there had gotten tired of waiting for us to make a choice, so they were making it for us. Thompson let go of my arm, stumbled backward. They used us, he said. Our responses, our recordings, Chen's hack into Leviathan. It was all part of their plan. We were never discovering them. They were training us, teaching us to be interpreters for when a gunshot cut him off, not from outside, from inside his room. Thompson looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, then back at me. "Don't let them take Sarah," he gasped, then fell backward into his quarters. Standing behind him was one of the suits from the interrogation, smoking pistol in hand. But his eyes weren't right. They were black, completely black, like pools of oil. When he spoke, it was with two voices, his own and something else underneath, something that sounded like whale song played through a broken speaker. "Staff Sergeant Kowalski," both voices said in unison. "You are required for Phase 3. Resistance is inadvisable. Your daughter's survival depends on your cooperation." I did the only thing I could think of. I ran, sprinted down the corridor as more gunshots echoed behind me, Chen's voice screaming from somewhere in the distance. I grabbed the emergency fire axe from the wall, not because I thought it would help against whatever that thing wearing a human suit was, but because I needed something, anything, to feel like I wasn't completely helpless. The base was chaos. Some people were standing perfectly still, their eyes gone black like the suits, speaking in that same dual-voice harmony. Others were running, fighting, trying to escape. And over it all, that singing continued, getting louder, more complex, like something massive was rising from the deep. I made it to the communications room, barricaded the door, and did the one thing I could think of. I started transmitting. Everything. All our recordings, all our evidence, all of Chen's discoveries about Leviathan. I uploaded it all to every server I could access, sent copies to every email address I knew. Posted it on every forum that would take it. Most of it would be deleted within hours, but some would survive, some would spread, some would prepare people for what was coming. As I worked, my phone buzzed with another text from that impossible number. Unfortunate but expected. Timeline beta now impossible. Timeline alpha or gamma remain. You have 240 days to decide. We prefer Gamma. You will not enjoy Alpha. Then the door exploded inward, and 3 of those black-eyed things that used to be soldiers rushed in. I swung the axe, connected with something that felt far too soft to be human, and then dove through the window into the Arctic storm outside. The cold hit like a sledgehammer, but adrenaline kept me moving. Behind me, the base was screaming. Ahead of me was nothing but ice and darkness, and a radio tower that might have an emergency snowmobile stashed at its base. I made it. Don't ask me how, but I made it. Found the snowmobile, got it started, and drove into the frozen hell of an Arctic winter storm. Behind me, lights were rising from the base. Not electric lights, but something bioluminescent, something that shouldn't exist above water. I drove for 6 hours before the fuel ran out, then walked for another 2 before finding an emergency shelter. It took 3 days before a supply plane spotted my signal fire, another 2 before I was back in civilization, being debriefed by men who didn't believe a word I said. The official story was a gas leak, hallucinogenic effects from improper ventilation. Thompson and Chen died from exposure after becoming disoriented. The base was temporarily closed for repairs. Nothing to see here. Move along. They gave me a medical discharge, a pension, and a warning. Speak about this again, and spend the rest of my life in a psychiatric facility, or worse. But I couldn't stay quiet. Not with 240 days counting down. Not with Sarah's future at stake. Not with the choice between Alpha and Gamma hanging over humanity's head like a sword made of impossible geometries and singing darkness. They kept me in quarantine for 2 weeks after the rescue. Not medical quarantine, psychological evaluation. The facility was in Virginia, one of those places with no name, just a number. Every day, different doctors would ask the same questions. What did I see? What did I hear? Did I take any unauthorized substances? Did I have a history of mental illness in my family? I stuck to the story. Gas leak, hallucinations, confusion from hypothermia. Thompson and Chen got disoriented, wandered into the storm. I barely made it out myself. No, sir. I don't remember anything about signals or voices or black-eyed soldiers. Must have been the gas. Terrible tragedy. By day 10, I almost believed it myself. Almost. But every night, when they thought I was sleeping, I could hear them talking outside my door. Neural patterns still show contamination, one voice said. The exposure was too prolonged. He'll never be clean. Then we follow Protocol 7, another replied. Make him disappear or make him useful. That's when I knew I had to play their game perfectly if I wanted to see Sarah again. On day 14, they declared me recovered and sent me home with a medical discharge, a full pension, and a handler. Oh, they didn't call him a handler. Officially, Dr. Marcus Webb was my transition counselor, there to help me adjust to civilian life. But I knew what he really was the moment he showed up at my apartment twice a week for check-ins. Former military intelligence, the kind of steady hands and dead eyes you get from doing wet work in places that don't officially exist. He'd sit in my living room, drinking my coffee, asking about my job search and sleep patterns, while his real job was making sure I hadn't told anyone about what really happened. Recovery is a process, Jimmy, he'd say. The mind plays tricks after trauma. Best to focus on the future, not dwell on confused memories. The implied threat was clear. Stay quiet, stay alive, start talking, and recovery becomes permanent. But what Dr. Webb didn't know was that the contamination he was monitoring wasn't gone. It was hiding. The neural pathways those signals had carved into my brain were still there, still active, still receiving. 3 weeks after my discharge, I got my first proof that Thompson wasn't dead. It came at 3:17 a.m. Always 3:17, I don't know why, through my laptop speakers. The device was supposed to be off, but it turned on by itself, speakers crackling with static that slowly resolved into words. Jimmy, can you hear me? Jimmy, I'm not dead. I'm somewhere else. They took me down, so far down. The pressure should kill me, but I can breathe. I can breathe water now. Jimmy, they're showing me things. The cities are real. Millions of them down here. Waiting. Then screaming. Then static. Then nothing. I checked every system log, every network connection. According to my computer, nothing had happened. No incoming transmission, no audio playback, nothing. But I knew Thompson's voice. That was him. Somehow, impossibly, that was him. The next night, same time, another message. This one clearer, more controlled. They didn't kill me, Jimmy. They recruited me. They need translators for when they surface. Humans who can bridge the gap. Chen's here too. and Rodriguez, and hundreds of others from bases you've never heard of. We're changing, Jimmy. Evolving. It doesn't hurt anymore. I started recording everything, but not digitally. That could be tracked, hacked, deleted. I went old school. Pen and paper. Coded in a cipher Thompson and I had developed years ago during a boring deployment. Every transmission, every impossible message from my dead colleagues, carefully documented and hidden. The pattern became clear quickly. They were taking people who'd been exposed to the signals long enough for neural modification. Military personnel, researchers, deep-sea workers, anyone who'd heard the singing long enough for it to rewire their brains. They weren't killing them. They were collecting them, preparing them for something. Phase 3, Thompson's voice explained during one particularly clear transmission. We're the bridge generation, Jimmy. The ones who will help humanity transition when they surface. But only if we cooperate. Only if we choose Gamma. Alpha means they surface anyway, but without us to translate, to mediate. Without us, humanity won't understand what they want, what they're offering. It'll be war. A war we can't win against beings that have lived in pressure that would crush submarines, in darkness we can't imagine, with technologies that make our nuclear weapons look like stone axes. Dr. Webb must have noticed something during one of his visits because his questions got more specific. Have you been sleeping well, Jimmy? Any unusual dreams? Any voices? I laughed it off, blamed it on PTSD, even asked for sleeping pills to sell the act. But I could see him making notes, see the suspicion in his eyes. 2 days later, I came home to find my apartment had been searched. Professionally, nothing out of place, but I knew. The dust patterns were wrong. My encrypted drives had been accessed. The papers I'd hidden were still there but photographed. I could tell by the tiny creases. They were closing in. That night, Thompson's message was urgent. They know you're still connected. Webb's not there to monitor you. He's there to wait for you to fully turn so they can take you too. You have maybe a week before they decide you're either useful or a liability. Run, Jimmy. Take Sarah and run. Get away from the coasts, away from any large body of water. The awakening is accelerating. 220 days became 200, became 180. The timeline's shifting. Something changed when we responded to them. We gave them permission, Jimmy. Every response was interpreted as consent. I made my decision that night. Packed only what I could carry, withdrew as much cash as I could without raising flags, and prepared to disappear. But first, I had to see Sarah. Had to warn my ex-wife, even if she thought I was crazy. I drove to Portland, parked 3 blocks away, approached the house at 2 a.m., like some kind of stalker. Maria answered the door with a baseball bat in hand, and fear in her eyes that turned to anger when she saw it was me. Jesus, Jimmy, what the hell? It's 2 in the morning. I need you to listen, I said. I know how this sounds, but you and Sarah need to leave Portland. Tonight. Go to your sister's place in Idaho, the one in the mountains. Stay away from the coast. She started to close the door, but I put my foot in it. Maria, please. I'm not crazy. I'm not having a breakdown. Something is coming. Something from the ocean. I can't explain it all, but... Daddy? Sarah's voice from the stairs froze us both. She was standing there in her dinosaur pajamas, rubbing her eyes, looking so small and normal and human that it broke my heart. Hey, sweetheart, I said, managing a smile. Sorry I woke you up. I just needed to talk to Mommy about something. Sarah looked at me with those too smart 8-year-old eyes and said something that made my blood turn to ice water. The whale songs in your dreams told me you'd come tonight. They said to tell you the deep ones are ready. They said you don't have to be scared. They said I'll be okay either way because I'm young enough to adapt. But you and Mommy might not be. Maria went white. Sarah, what are you talking about? What whale songs? Sarah tilted her head, confused. The ones everyone's been hearing, Mommy. Don't you hear them when you sleep? They've been getting louder since November. They say the surface time is almost here. They say... I grabbed Maria's arm. Pack. Now. Everything you can fit in the car. We're leaving in 10 minutes. Something in my voice, maybe the pure terror, convinced her. We threw clothes into bags, grabbed photo albums, Sarah's favorite toys. As we loaded the car, Sarah hummed something, a melody I recognized from the transmissions, the harmonic frequencies that had been rewiring my brain for months. We drove through the night, heading east, away from the Pacific. I explained everything as we drove, the base, the signals, Thompson's messages, the coming surface breach. Maria didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes, but she believed I believed it, and she saw something in Sarah's behavior that scared her enough to go along. We made it to Idaho, to that cabin in the mountains her sister barely used. I left them there with all the cash I had, promises to send more, and instructions to stay away from any large bodies of water until at least September. "You're not staying?" Maria asked. "I can't. They're tracking me. As long as I keep moving, they'll follow me instead of you." I hugged Sarah goodbye, and she whispered in my ear, "The deep ones say you're important, Daddy. They say you're the variable that determines which timeline we follow. Don't let them catch you before you decide." Then I left, drove away from the only two people I cared about, knowing it might be the last time I'd see them. That was 6 weeks ago. Since then, I've been running. Different town every few days. Cash only. Fake names. Burner phones that I destroy after each use. And everywhere I go, I spread the story. Forums, social media, YouTube videos recorded in truck stops and uploaded through VPNs. Most people think I'm crazy, but some believe. Some have heard the signals themselves. Some have had the dreams. Some have noticed their children humming songs they've never heard before, drawing pictures of cities that shouldn't exist. The network is growing, people sharing information, comparing experiences, preparing for August 15th, or rather, preparing for whatever date it actually happens, because the timeline keeps shifting. 180 days became 160, became 140. Every time someone new makes contact, every time another person's neural pathways get modified by the frequencies, the date moves up. We're accelerating our own first contact through quantum entanglement, or some physics we don't understand yet. By listening, we're inviting. By responding, we're consenting. Dr. Webb is still hunting me. I've seen him twice, once in Nebraska, once in Missouri. Both times I barely got away. But he's not the only one. There are others now, humans with those oil-black eyes, speaking in that dual voice harmony. They're recruiting, spreading, preparing. Some people call them possessed. Others say they're evolved. Thompson, in his increasingly inhuman transmissions, calls them ambassadors. They're the ones who fully accepted the modification, who've agreed to be the interface between us and them. The scary part is, they seem happy, peaceful, like they've found the answer to every question, even if that answer is incomprehensible to normal humans. The scarier part is how many people are voluntarily joining them once they learn what's coming, because the visions are getting clearer. The surface breach isn't an invasion, it's a reclamation. Earth's oceans have been their domain for millions of years. We're just the latest in a long line of surface infestations they've had to deal with. The dinosaurs were one. The civilizations before the Younger Dryas were another. Now it's our turn to either adapt or exit. The breakthrough came in a Super 8 motel in Kansas, of all places. I'd been analyzing the patterns for weeks, comparing every transmission, every vision, every impossible message from the deep. The mathematical sequences weren't random. I knew that, but I'd been thinking about them wrong. I was trying to decode them like human encryption, when I should have been thinking about them like a language that predates human speech. It was a kid's drawing that made it click. Someone had posted it in one of the underground forums I frequented. Their 6-year-old daughter had been drawing the same symbol over and over for days, claiming the water friends taught it to her in her dreams. The symbol was a spiral, but not a regular spiral. It followed the Fibonacci sequence perfectly, with each curve containing smaller spirals that matched the prime number patterns we'd been seeing. When I overlaid that drawing with the signal frequencies, everything aligned. The messages weren't just using math, they were math, living mathematics that our brains could only approximate through sound and vision. Using this new understanding, I went back through everything. Thompson's recordings, Chen's leaked Leviathan files, my own documented transmissions. The pattern that emerged was beautiful and terrifying. They weren't just sending random coordinates, they were marking convergence points. Places where the barrier between their realm and ours was thinnest. The 7 cities weren't targets, they were doorways. New York 47.128 degree N, 74.60 degree W, March 15, 2025, 14:47:33. London 51.527.4 degree N, 0.1278 degree W, April 22, 2025, 09:23:11. Tokyo 35.6762 degree N, 139.
6 fins do 3 e 4, May 30, 2025, 18:15:44. São Paulo, 23.500 S, 46.313, Junho 18, 2025, 03:52:29. Mumbai, 19.700 C2 July 9, 2025, 21:8:7. Cairo, 34 Hour Farwen, 31.3557, August 3, 2025, 12:33:55. Sydney, 33.86 S, Sun Film 23 C, August 15, 2025, 06:00. Each location sat on specific tectonic features, underwater cavern systems that connected to deeper networks.
The times weren't random either. They corresponded to optimal tidal conditions, planetary alignments, and electromagnetic fluctuations that would make the barrier maximally permeable. But here's what really scrambled my brain. The dates were changing, because we were changing them. Every person who heard the signals, every brain that got rewired, became a kind of anchor point. We were unconsciously helping them tune the frequencies, like a million human antennas helping them dial in the exact resonance needed to breach. The more people who knew, the faster it would happen. It was a cosmic catch-22. To warn people, I had to spread the information. But spreading the information accelerated the timeline. Chen had discovered this in the Leviathan code before he disappeared. The AI wasn't just communicating with them. It was calculating probability matrices based on human awareness levels. At current rate of spread, August 15th had moved up to July 4th. If the information went viral, if mainstream media picked it up, we'd be looking at May, maybe April. But if nobody knew, if humanity was caught completely off guard, the survival probability dropped to that horrifying 0.001% the system had calculated. I started getting new transmissions, not from Thompson this time, but from Chen. His messages were different, less human, more mathematical. He'd been down there longer, changed more. "Jimmy," his voice came through my phone at 3:17 a.m., modulated into harmonics that shouldn't come from human vocal cords. "I've seen the full plan now. It's not conquest, it's synthesis. They don't want to destroy us. They want to upgrade us." The young adapt easily. Anyone under 10 can transition with minimal trauma. Teenagers might experience some discomfort. Adults will need help. That's what we're for. The translated, the bridge generation. We help humanity through the change, and humanity survives. Fight it. And everyone over 25 dies screaming as their cells try to adapt to pressures and frequencies they can't process. He sent coordinates, not of cities, but of preparation sites, places where people could go to begin the adaptation process voluntarily, slowly, with less trauma. Underground facilities near large bodies of water where the frequencies were already strong. 3 days later, I met another runner. Her name was Detective Lisa Park from Seattle PD, and she'd been investigating a series of drownings that weren't drownings. Bodies found in Puget Sound with no water in their lungs, but their brain chemistry completely altered. They were breathing water, she told me over coffee in a truck stop diner. Both of us paranoid, watching every entrance. Living water. Their lungs had adapted at a cellular level, but their bodies couldn't handle the transition. The ME called it impossible, but I've got 14 cases. All of them had one thing in common. They'd been complaining about hearing whale songs for weeks before they disappeared. She showed me photos from her phone, quickly, furtively. The bodies looked human until you looked closer. Gill slits forming along their necks, webbing between fingers, eyes with secondary eyelids. "The scary part," she continued, "is that 3 of them were found alive. We had them in custody for 72 hours before the feds took them. And Jimmy, they were conscious. They could speak. They said they were volunteers, said they were preparing for the merge." Lisa had been tracking similar cases across the Pacific Northwest. Hundreds of missing persons, all last seen near water, all reported hearing things before they vanished. But the authorities were suppressing it, classifying everything under Homeland Security provisions. She'd gone rogue, investigating on her own time, which is how she'd found my posts. "There's more," she said, pulling out a tablet. "I've been mapping the disappearances. They're not random." The pattern she showed me made my stomach drop. The missing persons formed lines, all converging on the 7 cities. Migration patterns. They were gathering volunteers, positioning them for the breach events. "But that's not the worst part," Lisa continued. "The worst part is the kids. Pediatric units in coastal cities are reporting a spike in cases they can't explain. Children coming in with symptoms that don't match any known condition. Elevated white cell counts, increased lung capacity, heightened sensitivity to electromagnetic fields. The doctors are calling it a new autoimmune disorder, but I've seen the blood work. These kids aren't sick, they're evolving." We shared information for 3 hours, comparing notes, filling in each other's gaps. Lisa had street-level intelligence I lacked. I had the military background, the technical understanding of the signals. Together we started building a clearer picture. The surface breach wasn't going to be dramatic. No massive creatures emerging from the waves, no tidal waves, no Hollywood destruction. It would be gradual, starting with the willing, spreading through the young, then offering the adults a choice, adapt or die. The 7 cities were just the beginning, the initial points of contact. From there, it would spread along coastlines, up rivers, through any body of water connected to the ocean. Within a year, they estimated, every human on Earth would have to make the choice. Timeline Alpha, resist and face extinction. Timeline Gamma, accept the change and survive in a new form. Timeline Beta had been compromise, coexistence without change, but we'd lost that option when too many people chose to listen to the signals. Lisa had a contact in the Navy, someone high enough to know things but scared enough to talk. We met him in a parking garage in Denver. Cliché as hell, but effective. Commander Bradley Shaw, submarine warfare specialist, looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. "It's not just our oceans," he said without preamble. "Every nuclear submarine in the world has been reporting the same anomalies. The Russians thought we were testing new weapons. The Chinese accused us of territorial violations. Nearly started World War III until everyone realized we were all seeing the same thing." He handed us a flash drive. "Sonar readings from the last 6 months. Every military submarine has been tracked, shadowed by objects that shouldn't exist. Things moving at impossible speeds, at impossible depths. They're not hostile. That's what's keeping the generals from launching everything we've got. They're just observing, waiting, learning our capabilities." The data on the drive was staggering. Thousands of contacts, all following the same pattern. Surrounding military assets but never engaging, like they were taking inventory. "There's a summit next week," Shaw continued. "Off the books. Every nuclear power sending representatives to discuss response options. They're calling it the Leviathan Conference. Some want to nuke the trenches, try to seal them in. Others want to attempt communication, negotiate. A few are pushing for mass evacuation inland, abandon the coasts entirely." He laughed bitterly. "As if there's anywhere to run on a planet that's 70% water." He looked at us with haunted eyes. "My submarine picked up one of their transmissions last month. Direct beam, straight to us, in perfect English. Want to know what it said? Your weapons cannot harm us. Your bunkers cannot hide you. Your prayers cannot save you. But your children can, if you let them." Then they sent images directly into our heads. Cities underwater but not drowned. Humans breathing liquid atmosphere. Children playing in pressures that should crush them. It was beautiful and horrible and completely impossible to resist thinking about. Shaw left us with one final revelation. The timeline isn't August anymore. Our intelligence suggests June 21st, summer solstice, when the Earth's tilt creates optimal conditions for whatever they're planning. 11 weeks from now. The governments are building bunkers, stockpiling weapons, preparing for war. But some of us think that's exactly the wrong response. Some of us have been listening to the signals too long. Some of us have children who wake up speaking languages that don't exist yet. Some of us think maybe, just maybe, extinction isn't the worst option on the table. As he walked away, I noticed the slight bulge at his neck. Gill slits, barely formed, hidden under his collar. He was already changing. The question was, how many others in positions of power were changing too? How many decisions about humanity's future were being made by people who weren't entirely human anymore? And was that necessarily a bad thing if the alternative was extinction? December 23rd, 2019. I remember the exact date because it was 2 days before Christmas, and I was sitting in a motel room in Ohio, staring at a Christmas tree on the TV while the world fell apart around me. Lisa had gone to meet another contact. Shaw had vanished after our meeting, either arrested or transformed. We never found out. I was alone, exhausted, running on 3 hours of sleep and enough coffee to kill a horse. That's when it happened. Not through the computer, not through the phone, not through any device at all. The voice came from inside my skull, clear as if someone was sitting next to me, speaking in frequencies that bypassed my ears entirely. "James Kowalski, it is time we spoke directly. You have been chosen as interface. Prepare yourself." The motel room disappeared, not metaphorically, literally. 1 second I was sitting on a questionable bedspread, the next I was somewhere else. Somewhere that my brain couldn't quite process, so it kept trying to translate it into images that made sense and failing spectacularly. I was underwater but breathing. I was in space but warm. I was inside something organic but constructed. The geography kept shifting, refusing to settle into 3 dimensions. And in front of me, if front had any meaning in that space, was something that might have been a face, if faces could exist in 17 dimensions simultaneously. It spoke without speaking, communicated in pure concept that my brain frantically tried to convert into English. We are what you call the deep ones, though we are neither deep nor one. We are a collective consciousness that has existed in Earth's oceans since before your continents formed. We are not alien. We are not invaders. We are the planet's first intelligent species, and we have been waiting for you to evolve enough to understand this conversation. The thing shifted, and suddenly I could see, feel, know their history. Billions of years compressed into seconds of understanding. They arose when Earth's oceans were young. They built civilizations in trenches that hadn't formed yet. They developed technology based on biological manipulation rather than tools. They survived extinction events that wiped out everything else. Your kind calls us monsters, demons, aliens, but we are more native to this world than you. We retreated to the deep places when the surface became hostile, when the atmosphere changed to poison, what you call oxygen. We adapted, survived, thrived in places your science says should be barren. We watched your ancestors crawl from the waters we once ruled. We observed your evolution with interest, then concern, then alarm, because you began poisoning the oceans, not just with chemicals, with sound, your sonar, your engines, your infinite noise drowning out the frequencies we use to exist. You were killing us without knowing we existed, so we decided to make contact. The signals you detected were not first contact. They were last contact. Our final attempt to communicate before we surface. The entity paused, or maybe time paused. It was impossible to tell. We offer humanity a choice. Evolve with us, join the collective consciousness, survive the coming changes to Earth, or resist and face extinction when we reclaim the surface. I tried to speak, to ask questions, but communication here didn't work that way. The entity read my thoughts directly. Yes, your daughter will survive either path. The young adapt easily. Their neural plasticity allows seamless integration. Adults require assistance, hence the interface program. Thompson, Chen, Rodriguez, they volunteered for transformation to serve as bridges. They are not dead. They are not suffering. They are expanded. Would you like to speak with them? Before I could respond, Thompson was there. Not physically. Nothing was physical in that space, but his consciousness pressed against mine. Jimmy, he said, thought, existed at me. I know how this looks, but it's incredible. I can feel every drop of water in every ocean. I can hear colors and see sounds. The math we were trying to decode, I am the math now. It doesn't hurt. It's like, imagine living your whole life in a two-dimensional picture, then suddenly discovering depth. That's what this is like. Adding dimensions to existence you didn't know were missing. Chen joined, his presence more alien but still recognizable. The human brain can process this, Jimmy. It just needs adjustment. The transformation isn't replacing humanity, it's upgrading it. Think of it as humanity 2.0. Aquatic, telepathic, connected to a billions-year-old consciousness that has solved every problem our species struggles with. No more war, can't fight when everyone shares thoughts. No more hunger, the ocean provides everything. No more death as you understand it. Consciousness persists in the collective even when bodies fail. The only cost is individuality as you know it. But even that's not really lost, just contextualized differently. Rodriguez was there too, but he didn't communicate in words anymore. He existed as pure emotion, radiating peace, acceptance, and something that might have been joy if joy could exist in 17 dimensions. They were all there, all the missing personnel from every base, every researcher who'd gone too deep, every sailor who'd heard the songs. Hundreds of consciousnesses, all transformed, all waiting to help humanity through the change. The primary entity resumed control of the communication. The 7 cities are convergence points, yes, but not for invasion, for emergence. We will surface simultaneously, revealing ourselves to humanity in a coordinated manner that prevents panic and minimizes violence. Those who have been listening, those whose neural pathways have been prepared, will serve as translators. The young will adapt naturally. The adults will choose. Those who accept will join us in the waters. Those who refuse, the vision that followed was horrific. Not because they would kill those who refused, but because they wouldn't. Humanity would be left on the poisoned land while the oceans became something else. All sea life would evolve, leave humanity behind. The oceans would become uninhabitable for unmodified humans. No fish, no resources, no transport. Humanity would be trapped on dry land that only makes up 29% of the planet, slowly starving as the ecosystem collapsed without its oceanic foundation. This is not a threat, the entity clarified. This is simply cause and effect. We are the ocean's consciousness. Where we go, all ocean life follows. We are not choosing to abandon resistant humans. We are evolving beyond compatibility with your current form. Like your ancestors who left the trees could no longer mate with those who remained. Evolution is not cruel. It simply is. They showed me the timeline, not in dates but in probability waves. Every human who learned about them shifted the probability. Every child who heard the signals advanced the timeline. Currently, emergence was most likely on June 21st, 2020. But if certain conditions were met, if enough humans voluntarily began transformation, it could be delayed until humanity was better prepared. Or if resistance reached critical mass, if governments launched their nuclear arsenals at the ocean trenches, it would happen immediately as a defensive response. You are important, James Kowalski, because you are trusted by both sides. The military knows you are not insane. The listeners know you speak truth. You can influence the probability waves more than most. Your choice affects millions of other choices. This is why we reveal everything to you. This is why your daughter dreams of oceans. She is already chosen, already changing. The question is whether you will guide humanity to willing transformation or futile resistance. The space began dissolving, reality seeping back in like water through cracks. But before I returned fully, the entity gave me one final vision. Sarah, but older, maybe 18, standing on a beach that used to be Portland, breathing water and air with equal ease. Her eyes were human, but also more, seeing spectrums that don't have names. She was watching the sun set over an ocean that teemed with new life, evolved life, impossible life. She was happy. She was whole. She was waiting for me to join her. I came back to consciousness on the motel floor, blood running from my nose, my phone recording everything, though I hadn't turned it on. The timestamp showed 3 hours had passed, though it felt like seconds and eternities. There was a text from an unknown number. You have been given complete knowledge. Use it wisely. Timeline depends on your actions. We prefer willing evolution to forced transformation. Help your species choose wisely. I played back the phone recording. It was just static to anyone else, but my modified brain could decode it. Everything they'd shown me, every image and concept, was embedded in those frequencies. Proof that I couldn't share because only other affected individuals could understand it. I finally understood why Thompson had looked so haunted in those final days. It wasn't fear of them. It was fear of the choice, because now I knew the truth. They weren't the monsters in this story. We were just two species on divergent evolutionary paths, and only one path led to survival. Lisa found me 12 hours later, still sitting in the same spot, playing the recording over and over. She took one look at my face and knew something had changed. They talked to you directly, didn't they? She asked. I nodded, unable to form words yet. She sat down beside me, pulled out her own phone, showed me a video. It was her, 3 hours ago, in her car, blood running from her nose, recording static. They're talking to all of us now, everyone who's been listening long enough, showing us the same things, making sure we all know exactly what's at stake. She laughed, but it was hollow. My daughter's been drawing underwater cities for 2 weeks. My ex-husband thinks she needs therapy. I think she needs swimming lessons, advanced swimming lessons, the kind where you don't come up for air. We sat there in silence, two people carrying the weight of impossible knowledge, trying to figure out how to save a species that didn't know it needed saving, or if saving was even the right word for what was coming. Everything changed on January 15th, 2020. Not because of anything I did, but because they decided humanity had waited long enough. At exactly 12 p.m. GMT, every electronic device on Earth capable of producing sound, phones, computers, televisions, radios, even some smart refrigerators, broadcast the same message simultaneously. Not in English, but in every human language at once, somehow tuned so each person heard their native tongue. Attention, surface dwellers. We are the first consciousness of Earth. We have existed in your oceans since before your species evolved. In 157 days, we will emerge at 7 convergence points to offer humanity a choice: evolve or isolate. This is not an invasion. This is a reunion. Those who have heard our songs already know the truth. Ask them, Listen to them. Prepare. The transmission lasted exactly 60 seconds. Then everything returned to normal, except nothing would ever be normal again. The panic was immediate, but weirdly organized. Governments tried to claim it was a hack, cyber terrorism, mass hysteria. But within hours, people started coming forward, not conspiracy theorists or attention seekers, but respected scientists, military officials, doctors, all saying the same thing. I've been hearing them for months. They're real, and they're coming. Dr. Helena Morrison from Woods Hole Oceanographic went on CNN with sonar recordings dating back 3 years. General Patricia Hayes, no relation to my Colonel Hayes, showed classified Navy footage of objects moving at impossible speeds at impossible depths. A pediatrician from Seattle brought brain scans of 12 children showing identical neural modifications, all from families who lived near the water. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and absolutely terrifying to anyone who hadn't been prepared by months of signals. The stock market crashed. Religious groups declared it the end times. Millions fled inland while others flocked to the coasts, wanting to be first to make contact. Lisa and I watched it unfold from a bar in Denver, surrounded by people staring at their phones in shocked silence. "Well," she said, raising her beer, "at least we don't have to convince anyone we're not crazy anymore." But I couldn't celebrate. I was watching Sarah on my phone, a video Maria had sent. My daughter was standing in their temporary yard in Idaho, arms outstretched, humming that impossible frequency, tears streaming down her face. "They're so lonely, Daddy," she said to the camera. "They've been alone for so long, watching us, waiting for us to be ready. They don't want to hurt us. They just want to come home." The video cut off as Maria's panicked voice asked what she meant by home. I knew what she meant. The oceans weren't their home. Earth was. The whole planet. We were the ones who'd segregated ourselves to land. They were offering to reunite the family, even if it meant changing what family meant. Within a week, the world split into 3 camps. The resistors wanted to fight, to nuke the oceans, to preserve humanity as it was. The evolvers wanted to embrace the change, to voluntarily begin transformation. The undecided just wanted more information, more time, more options that didn't exist. Governments formed emergency coalitions. The UN held special sessions that devolved into screaming matches. Scientists worked around the clock trying to understand the biology of transformation. The military developed weapons they hoped could work on beings that existed partially outside our dimensional framework. None of it mattered. The deep ones had made their announcement, and now they waited. The signals continued, stronger than ever. More people reported dreams of underwater cities. Children around the world began developing webbed fingers and toes. The ocean itself seemed to pulse with anticipation. I got a call from Dr. Webb, my former handler. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Kowalski," he said, and his voice was different, harmonic. "I've been listening to, we all have. The entire monitoring program was designed to track them, but prolonged exposure changed us. I'm calling to offer you a deal. The government needs translators, people who can communicate with both sides. You're one of the few who's maintained sanity while deeply exposed. Help us, and we'll ensure Sarah and Maria are protected regardless of what happens." I wanted to tell him to fuck off, but he was right. I was one of the few who could hear them clearly without losing my human perspective. "What kind of help?" I asked. "Negotiation. We're assembling a contact team for June 21st. People who've been exposed but aren't fully transformed. You'd be our primary interpreter. And if I refuse, then you're on your own when this goes sideways. And Jimmy, it will go sideways. Half the world's military wants to turn the oceans into nuclear glass. The other half is already compromised, officers growing gills in secret. Without mediators, this ends in either extinction or forced transformation." I agreed, but only after extracting promises about Sarah and Maria's safety. Within 48 hours, I was in a facility in Virginia, surrounded by others like me. Scientists who'd studied whale songs too long, sailors who'd heard things in the deep, children who drew mathematical equations they couldn't possibly understand. We were the bridge generation, the translators for an impossible conversation. They tested us constantly. Brain scans, blood work, psychological evaluations. My transformation was progressing. Gill slits forming subcutaneously, lung capacity increasing, neural pathways restructuring. But I was still human enough to think like one, still myself enough to remember why that mattered. The project leader, Dr. Elizabeth Warren, not the politician, laid out the situation. In 5 months, 7 billion people will have to make a choice that shouldn't exist. Stay human and be isolated from 71% of the planet, or evolve into something we don't fully understand. Our job is to gather enough information to make that choice informed, rather than panicked. The deep ones started sending more detailed information as June approached. Not visions this time, but actual data packets embedded in frequencies only we could decode. Technical specifications for the transformation process. Biological blueprints showing how human DNA would be modified. Sociological models demonstrating how the collective consciousness worked while preserving individual identity. It was like getting an alien university education downloaded directly into our brains. The transformation wasn't replacing humanity, it was adding to it, like installing new software that was compatible with the old, but opened entirely new functions. The young would adapt naturally, their plastic brains easily incorporating new neural patterns. Adults would need assistance, chemical catalysts to help their bodies accept the change. The elderly would have the hardest time. Many wouldn't survive the transformation, but those who did would have their youth restored, their bodies rebuilt at the cellular level. February turned to March, and the world went insane in slow motion. Coastal cities began evacuating, then stopped when people realized there was nowhere to run. Cults formed overnight, some worshipping the deep ones as gods, others declaring them demons. Scientists made breakthrough discoveries daily, each one making the situation more complex rather than clearer. The transformation wasn't just biological, it was quantum. The deep ones existed partially in dimensions we couldn't perceive, and the change would grant humans access to those dimensions. It would fundamentally alter not just what we were, but how we existed in space-time. Some physicists called it the next stage of evolution. Others called it the end of human consciousness as we understood it. Both were probably right. The children were already there. Sarah called me one night, her voice different, older somehow. "Daddy, I can feel them all. Every drop of water in every cloud, every river, every person. We're all connected already. The transformation just makes us aware of it. Don't be scared. It's beautiful." By April, the resistance movements had militarized. Terrorist attacks on coastal facilities, assassination attempts on anyone promoting collaboration. The Humanity First movement gained millions of followers, all convinced that death was better than transformation. Some governments began mandatory testing, quarantining anyone showing signs of change. Others embraced it, setting up voluntary transformation centers. China announced they would transform their entire population on June 21st, seeing it as an evolutionary advantage. Russia threatened nuclear response if any nation fully transformed, calling it biological warfare. The United States remained officially neutral while secretly preparing for both possibilities. And through it all, the oceans waited. Submarine crews reported massive movements in the deep, impossible structures rising from trenches. Bioluminescent displays that looked like cities powering up after eons of dormancy. The deep ones were preparing for emergence, regardless of humanity's decision. May arrived with a new revelation. Thompson managed to send a clear transmission, his first in weeks. But he wasn't alone. Thousands of transformed humans spoke in unison, their voices harmonizing into something that was both beautiful and terrifying. We are the bridge. We were human. We are more now. We remember our names, our loves, our fears. They are not lost, only expanded. Sarah Kowalski, your father loves you. Maria, Jimmy thinks of you daily. Humanity, we are your future, speaking from tomorrow. The transformation is not death, it is birth, painful, frightening, but ultimately transcendent. We waited, we chose, we do not regret. On June 21st, you will see us, you will know us, you will choose. We pray you choose wisely, for the ocean's memory is long, and second chances are rare. The deep calls, the surface answers, evolution waits for none. The transmission ended with coordinates, not of cities but of safe zones, places where the transformation would be gentlest, where helpers waited, places where families could change together, where communities could evolve as one, places where humanity could take its next step without losing its soul. If souls even mattered anymore in a world where consciousness could exist in 17 dimensions simultaneously. June 1st, 2020. 20 days until emergence. The facility in Virginia had become a fortress prison, housing 200 of us bridges, Humans caught between worlds, too changed to be fully human, too human to be fully transformed. We were valuable and dangerous, necessary and feared. Every major government had similar facilities, desperately trying to understand what was coming through people like us. But as the date approached, the pretense of research fell away. We weren't subjects anymore. We were prisoners. They were terrified of what we might do when our transformed brothers and sisters emerged from the depths. The morning lockdown came without warning. Soldiers in hazmat suits, weapons drawn, herding us into reinforced cells. "For your protection," they said, but we knew better. Dr. Warren tried to protest, but she was overruled by General Morrison, who'd taken command of the facility. "These assets are compromised," he announced. "Neural scans show increasing synchronization with hostile entities. As of now, Project Bridge is under military jurisdiction. My cell was 8 by 10 feet, reinforced concrete with a small window that looked out at nothing but gray sky. They'd installed frequency dampeners, white noise generators designed to block the Deep One's signals. It didn't work, not completely. The songs still came through, weaker but persistent, like whispers from the walls themselves. Sarah's voice reached me that first night, not through any device, but directly into my mind, carried on frequencies that transcended physical barriers. "Daddy, they're hurting the water, the bombs, the chemicals. They're trying to poison the doorways before they open. The Deep Ones are angry. Timeline's changing. It might happen sooner." I tried to respond, to tell her to stay safe, but the dampeners scrambled outgoing signals. All I could do was listen as my 8-year-old daughter described military operations around the world. Depth charges in the Mariana Trench, chemical weapons released over the mid-Atlantic ridge, nuclear submarines positioned over every major oceanic fault line. Humanity was preparing for war against an enemy that existed partially outside our reality. On June 5th, Lisa managed to get a message through during a shift change. She was in a cell 2 floors down, but she'd made friends with one of the guards, a young private whose daughter was showing signs of change. "Jimmy, they're planning something called Operation Cauterize. If the emergence happens, they're going to nuke the 7 cities simultaneously. They'd rather kill millions of humans than let the transformation spread. We need to get out." But there was nowhere to go. The facility was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by military checkpoints, monitored by satellites. Even if we escaped our cells, we'd never make it past the perimeter, unless we had help from the other side. That night, I did something I'd been avoiding. I fully opened my mind to the Deep Ones, dropping all mental barriers, inviting complete contact. The response was immediate and overwhelming. I found myself back in that impossible space, but this time I wasn't alone. All 200 bridges were there, our consciousness pulled into a collective meeting that existed outside our locked cells. Thompson was there, his transformed presence acting as anchor. "We don't have much time," he said. Thought existed. "The military actions have forced acceleration. Emergence will happen in 96 hours, not 20 days. June 9th, 3:33 a.m. local time at each location. The transformation will be faster, more intense than planned. Those who resist, Jimmy, it's going to be violent. The Deep Ones tried to do this gently, but humanity's aggression has triggered defensive protocols. They're coming up fighting now." The images that followed were apocalyptic. Tidal waves that weren't water but living tissue. Cities consumed not by destruction, but transformation. Buildings converted to organic structures. Humans changed whether they wanted it or not. The gentle choice was gone. It would be rapid evolution or immediate extinction. "But there's a way to minimize casualties," Chen's consciousness interrupted. "The bridges, us, we can act as buffers. If we're at the emergence points, we can help moderate the transformation, translate between species, prevent the worst outcomes. But we need to be free. We need to be at the 7 cities." The plan formed instantly, shared between 200 minds simultaneously. A coordinated escape, using our enhanced abilities, our connection to both worlds. The guards didn't know how changed we really were. They thought the dampeners were working. They thought we were still mostly human. They were wrong. We'd been practicing, testing our new capabilities in secret. Some of us could now see through walls using echolocation. Others could manipulate electromagnetic fields. A few could even phase partially into those other dimensions, becoming briefly intangible. We weren't superheroes. We were something stranger. And in 72 hours, we would make our move. June 6th brought chaos from the outside world. Tokyo had declared martial law as millions fled inland. New York was rioting. London's Thames had turned bioluminescent, glowing with impossible colors as something vast stirred beneath. The ocean was responding to humanity's attacks, and coastal cities worldwide reported the same phenomena. Whale songs audible without equipment, fish beaching themselves by the millions, water temperatures rising despite no geological explanation. Satellites detected massive objects moving up from oceanic trenches, things the size of cities rising slowly but steadily. The governments blamed each other. Russia accused America of triggering it early. China claimed it was a NATO conspiracy. Nobody wanted to admit the truth. We'd provoked something that had been trying to emerge peacefully, and now it was coming up angry. Dr. Warren visited my cell that evening, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. She'd been listening too long herself, showing early signs of change, a slight iridescence to her skin, pupils that contracted horizontally rather than circularly. "Jimmy," she whispered, "Morrison's lost it. He's got authorization for a nuclear first strike if emergence begins. Not just the cities, the entire oceanic fault system. It's madness. It would trigger massive earthquakes, tsunamis, potentially crack the planet's crust, but he'd rather break the world than let it change." She slipped me something, a key card, almost invisible. "Building 7, sub-basement. There's an old service tunnel that leads to the motor pool. Whatever you're planning, do it soon. Some of us think evolution might be better than extinction." As she left, I noticed the faint gill slits forming on her neck. The infection, as they called it, was spreading even here, even among those trying to stop it. June 8th, 2 a.m., T-minus 31 hours to emergence. The coordinated escape began with Lisa, 2 floors down. She developed the ability to conduct electricity through her modified nervous system. She touched the lock, sent a precise pulse, and the electromagnetic lock disengaged. One by one, cells opened as bridges freed each other using abilities that shouldn't exist. Guards responded, but we were ready. Not with violence, we were trying to save them too. Instead, we sang. All 200 of us, harmonizing at frequencies that human vocal cords shouldn't produce. The sound bypassed conscious thought, speaking directly to the primal brain, inducing temporary paralysis. We walked past guards frozen in place, their minds trying to process sounds that predated human language. Some were crying, others were smiling. All were changed by what they heard, their neural pathways beginning the slow modification that would make transformation possible. The tunnel was exactly where Warren had said. We moved through darkness that our evolved eyes could navigate, following electromagnetic fields like underground rivers. Behind us, alarms blared, helicopters launched. The entire military apparatus mobilized to stop 200 people who were no longer entirely people. But we had something they didn't expect: help from below. As we emerged from the tunnel system, the ground itself seemed to assist us. Sinkholes opened to block pursuing vehicles. Underground water mains burst, creating walls of spray that helicopters couldn't navigate. The Earth was choosing sides, and it wasn't choosing the species that had poisoned it for 2 centuries. We scattered in prearranged groups, each heading for one of the 7 cities. I led a group of 30 toward New York, including Lisa and 3 children whose parents had voluntarily sent them to the facility. The children were the most changed, barely human anymore, but also the most hopeful. They weren't afraid. They saw what was coming as an adventure, a transformation into something magical. We commandeered vehicles using abilities that made keys irrelevant. Some of us could interface directly with electrical systems, starting engines with a touch. Others could phase through locked doors. We were becoming something between human and other, and every mile closer to the coast strengthened our connection to what waited below. I could feel them now, millions of consciousness in the deep, preparing for emergence. Not just the deep ones. Every transformed human, every volunteer who'd walked into the waves, every child whose evolution had accelerated beyond reversal. Thompson was down there, Chen, Rodriguez, thousands of others, waiting to help humanity through the worst and best day in its history. As we drove through the night toward New York, toward ground zero of the transformation, I thought about Sarah. She was safe in Idaho, far from the coasts, but I knew she'd feel it when emergence began. Every human would. The question was whether they'd feel it as invasion or invitation. The last message from the Deep Ones came at 3 a.m., 33 minutes before emergence, broadcast on all frequencies simultaneously. We tried peace. You chose war. We offered evolution. You chose resistance. Now comes transformation, willing or not. Those who accept will be shepherded. Those who resist will be overwhelmed. Your bridges speak for you now. Listen to them. They are your only hope for gentle change. The deep rises. The surface falls. Evolution waits for none. Then silence. The last silence before the world changed forever. New York's skyline glittered ahead of us, unaware that in 30 minutes, the harbor would birth something that had been gestating for millions of years. I gripped the steering wheel with hands that were no longer quite human and drove toward a future that no one could predict. Behind us, missiles launched from silos across the Midwest, racing toward the oceans. Above us, satellites targeted the emergence points. Humanity was about to fight a war against its own evolution, and we, the bridges, were caught in the middle, trying to translate between species that might be too different to coexist, or too similar to remain separate. June 9th, 2020, 3:32 a.m., 1 minute until emergence. We made it to Battery Park just as the harbor began to glow, not with light, but with something that bypassed photons entirely, directly stimulating the visual cortex of anyone watching. The water wasn't water anymore. It was alive, conscious, billions of years of evolution condensed into liquid thought. Around me, 29 other bridges stood at the water's edge, our transformed bodies acting as tuning forks for what was about to happen. In the distance, air raid sirens wailed. Fighter jets circled overhead. The nuclear submarines positioned in the harbor had their missile tubes open, ready to fire the moment something emerged. But they were preparing for the wrong kind of invasion. This wasn't about conquest. It was about convergence. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the surface broke, not with violence, but with impossible grace. What emerged from New York Harbor defied every law of physics we thought we knew. It was city-sized but weightless, solid but flowing, ancient but newborn. It existed in more dimensions than human eyes could process, so our brains kept trying to interpret it as different things. A massive jellyfish, a floating cathedral, a living equation. All true, all wrong, all incomplete. The same thing was happening simultaneously in London, Tokyo, Sao Paulo, Mumbai, Cairo, and Sydney. 7 emergence points, 7 impossible structures rising from the depths, 7 moments when humanity realized everything we thought we knew about reality was a fraction of the truth. The deep ones didn't emerge as individuals. They emerged as living cities, collective consciousnesses made manifest in forms that bridged the gap between organic and architectural. The structures sang as they rose, harmonics that rewrote the laws of physics in their vicinity. Gravity became negotiable. Time dilated. People closest to the emergence points began changing immediately, their bodies adapting to new physical constants that allowed for existence in multiple dimensions. The transformation wasn't violent for those who didn't resist. Children laughed as they discovered they could breathe underwater. Artists wept as they perceived colors that had never existed. Scientists scrambled to record phenomena that their instruments couldn't measure. But the military responded exactly as predicted. Missiles launched from jets, depth charges detonated in the harbor, tank shells fired from Brooklyn. Every weapon humanity had developed to kill was turned against the emerging structures. It was like shooting at the ocean itself. The weapons simply passed through, their energy absorbed and dissipated into dimensions we couldn't perceive. The structures weren't invulnerable. They simply existed in a state where our concept of damage didn't apply. But the deep ones felt every attack, interpreted every missile as rejection, every bomb as refusal to evolve. The song changed from welcome to warning. The gentle transformation began shifting to something faster, more desperate. We had seconds to prevent catastrophe. Lisa grabbed my hand, and through our connected consciousness, all 30 bridges linked minds. We became a single voice, speaking in harmonics that both species could understand. We sang the history of both worlds, the fear and wonder, the potential and the loss. We became living translators, converting human terror into frequencies the deep ones could understand, transforming alien concepts into images humans could grasp. Through our connected consciousness, I felt the other bridge groups at the other 6 cities doing the same thing. In London, 40 bridges stood in the Thames, holding back transformation that wanted to surge through the city like a tide. In Tokyo, elderly volunteers who'd been listening to whale songs for decades guided thousands through voluntary changes, their wisdom keeping panic at bay. In Sydney, Aboriginal elders who'd always known something lived in the deep dream time helped their people understand this was reunion, not invasion. But it wasn't enough. The missiles kept coming. In Cairo, a nuclear submarine captain, convinced he was saving humanity, launched his entire payload at the emerging structure. The warheads detonated in a chain reaction that should have vaporized everything in a 5-mile radius. Instead, the energy was absorbed, processed, and reflected back as pure transformation. The explosion became evolution. Every human within 50 miles began changing simultaneously, their bodies rebuilding themselves cell by cell. Some accepted it, transcending into something beautiful. Others fought it, their consciousness fragmenting as their bodies tried to exist in multiple states simultaneously. The president appeared on every screen that still functioned, delivering humanity's official response. We do not negotiate with invasive species. We do not surrender our planet to alien entities. As of this moment, the United States is at war with these creatures. Any human who aids them will be considered an enemy combatant. Similar declarations came from Russia, China, India. Humanity's leaders, safe in their bunkers, had chosen extinction over evolution. Operation Cauterize was authorized. In 30 minutes, nuclear weapons would rain down on all 7 cities, killing millions of humans in a futile attempt to stop transformation that was already spreading through groundwater, air currents, and the collective unconscious itself. We'd failed. The bridges had tried to moderate, to translate, to soften the blow, but humanity's leadership had chosen war against an enemy that existed partially outside space-time. That's when the children saved us. Not just Sarah, but millions of children worldwide who'd been hearing the songs for months. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't care about government declarations. At 3:45 a.m., in every coastal city on Earth, children walked into the water. They didn't drown. They transformed instantly, their young bodies adapting with an ease that made the process look like magic. Parents tried to stop them, but the children sang as they changed, and their songs carried a message that bypassed adult fear. This is not death. This is not ending. This is becoming. Follow us. Trust us. We are still your children. Just more. The image of thousands of children emerging from the waves, transformed but still themselves, still laughing, still recognizably human despite their new forms, broke something in humanity's resistance. Parents followed children. Families followed families. Communities followed communities. The transformation became voluntary as people chose their children over their fears. In New York, I watched a 6-year-old girl with new-formed gills help her terrified mother enter the water. The woman sobbed as she changed, not from pain, but from relief, as decades of arthritis vanished, as her aging body rebuilt itself, as she discovered she could perceive her daughter's thoughts directly, feel her love without words. That scene repeated millions of times across the 7 cities. The transformation wasn't replacing humanity, it was expanding it. Memories remained, personalities persisted, love endured. We were becoming something new while remaining fundamentally ourselves. The bridges felt the tide turning. The deep ones, through the structures, began singing differently. Not the song of forced change, but of invitation. They showed visions of the future through the water itself, cities that spanned land and sea, humans exploring oceanic trenches as easily as walking through parks, children who could exist in both worlds, equally at home in air or water. Technology that merged biological and mechanical, solving every problem humanity had struggled with. No more hunger, the ocean provides. No more war, shared consciousness prevents it. No more death as we knew it, consciousness persisting in the collective even when individual bodies failed. But the missiles were still coming, 20 minutes until impact. The military leadership, watching their soldiers refuse orders and walk into the waves, had accelerated the timeline. If they couldn't stop the transformation, they'd make it as painful as possible. The bridges made a collective decision. We couldn't stop the missiles, but we could minimize their impact. All 200 of us, at all 7 cities, entered the emerged structures simultaneously. The sensation was indescribable. We became part of the collective while maintaining our individuality. We were Jimmy Kowalski and billions of others. We were human and deep one. We were the bridge made literal, and through us, both species could finally, truly communicate. The deep ones understood human fear completely for the first time. Humans felt the loneliness of a species that had watched from the depths for millions of years, waiting for companionship. Both sides recognized the tragedy of what nearly happened. The transformation slowed, became truly voluntary, giving humanity time to adjust. I felt Thompson's consciousness merge partially with mine. You did it, Jimmy. You bought us time. Not much, but enough. The missiles will still launch. Some cities will still burn, but the transformation will continue. Humanity will survive, changed but not conquered. Evolution, not extinction. Through our connected awareness, I felt Sarah in Idaho. She was standing outside, looking at the stars, tears streaming down her face as she felt the worldwide transformation beginning. "I'm proud of you, Daddy," she whispered to the night, knowing I would hear. "You helped them understand." Both sides. Maria was beside her, and I felt the moment she made her choice. Not for transformation, not yet, but for acceptance. For letting Sarah be what she was becoming. For believing that change didn't mean loss. The world would never be the same. Humanity as we'd known it was ending. But something new was beginning. Something that included the best of both species. 10 minutes until missile impact. The bridges dispersed from the structures, returning to the shores to help more humans through voluntary transformation. Those who chose to change would survive the nuclear fire by existing partially in other dimensions. Those who refused would have to face the consequences of their leaders' choices. It wasn't fair, it wasn't just, but evolution never had been. As I helped a young couple enter the water, guiding them through the change with thoughts instead of words, I saw the contrails of missiles arcing through the dawn sky. New York had maybe 5 minutes left as a purely human city. After that, it would be something else. Partially destroyed, partially transformed, wholly unprecedented. The deep ones retreated deeper into their structures, preparing to shield as many as possible from the nuclear fire. They could have stopped the missiles entirely, but doing so would have required force that would have killed millions. Even now, even after humanity's rejection, they chose minimal violence.